Hello everyone, and welcome to Zen Echoes of Wisdom. Today, we embark on a heartfelt and thought-provoking journey into the realm of relationships, mindfulness, and the art of preserving inner peace in our twilight years. I have discovered that aging brings with it both profound gifts: wisdom, freedom, a sense of life's deeper meaning, and also challenges, especially when it comes to the people we interact with on a regular basis. We often speak of old age as the golden years, imagining it as a time to relax, enjoy life, and reflect upon the paths we have walked. However, genuine peace and happiness in those years demand that we look carefully at our relationships. We might imagine that in old age, everyone around us will simply reciprocate love and respect. But that is not always the case. Even certain family members can become sources of negativity if we aren't conscious of healthy boundaries. I invite you to reflect deeply on the 5 types of individuals who, according to this perspective, can disrupt the tranquility you have cultivated. While these categories originate from teachings often linked to the spirit of compassion, mindfulness, and boundary setting, they can also be enriched by personal observations. Throughout this comprehensive discussion, we will not only explore the potential pitfalls of associating closely with such individuals but also delve into the ways we can compassionately manage those relationships, guided by the Buddhist principles that emphasize compassion for both self and others. By the end of our journey, I hope you will have a clearer sense of how to recognize manipulative behaviors, draw healthy boundaries, and nourish a circle of loving, respectful connections. Most importantly, I encourage you to live with mindfulness, placing the well-being of your heart at the center of all interactions. After all, as the Buddha often reminded us, we must take responsibility for our own inner peace. So, let us dive into this mindful exploration with an open heart and a clear intention to cultivate serenity, no matter our age. 1. Prelude, the golden years and the value of mindful relationships. When we speak of old age, countless images come to mind: an older couple sipping tea in a sunlit garden, grandparents passing on wisdom and family stories to excited grandchildren, or perhaps someone sitting by a window, quietly reflecting on the tapestry of experiences that make up a lifetime. Yet, behind these serene images, the quality of one's life in old age often hinges on one crucial factor: the nature of our relationships. From early childhood, we are taught that family is everything, that close ties with relatives and dear friends define much of who we are. But as we mature, we realize that not all familial or friendship bonds are conducive to our well-being. Indeed, certain people can become such a strain on our psychological and emotional health that they overshadow the joys of life. Sometimes we cling to them out of a sense of obligation, sometimes out of love, and sometimes because we simply do not know how to say no. In Buddhism, non-attachment is an essential principle that teaches us not to cling blindly to things or even relationships that harm our peace of mind. It does not mean we stop caring. Instead, it implies a gentle loosening of the unhealthy grip we might have on people or beliefs that no longer serve our highest good. In advanced years, this principle becomes especially relevant. After all, if we've spent our entire adult lives working hard, raising families, and contributing to society, don't we deserve a measure of tranquility and self-care in return? One of the greatest misunderstandings about Buddhist ideas is the assumption that setting boundaries or distancing ourselves from negative influences is selfish. However, Buddhism views compassion as a balanced approach, an understanding that we can only truly help or love others if we also respect our own limits. The Buddha spoke often of the middle way, Cautioning against extremes. One extreme might be pushing everyone away, giving in to bitterness and isolation. The other extreme might be letting everyone walk all over us in the name of being good and benevolent. Thus, the impetus for identifying the 5 types of people to avoid in old age is not to sow division or anger, but rather to preserve one's sacred inner peace. The nature of these 5 types: the manipulator, the self-absorbed, the chronic critic, the irresponsible dependent, and the ungrateful taker, tends to remain consistent across different cultures, times, and places. They appear because human nature has universal patterns, and aging does not exempt us from encountering them. I have encountered these personalities in countless real-life scenarios, in lay Buddhist communities seeking spiritual solace, in academic circles discussing the practical applications of mindfulness, and in everyday family gatherings. Over time, I came to realize that your mental well-being can suffer gravely if you allow these energies to take root in your life, especially in your later years when your emotional resilience may wane, your physical vitality may decline, and your time feels more precious than ever. Before we examine each archetype, consider this approach as a protective measure, a spiritual vaccine, if you will. Just as we fortify our bodies against illness, we fortify our hearts against toxic emotional entanglements. Taking the time to reflect on these personality traits, noticing if they appear in people around you, or sometimes even in your own self, is an act of mindfulness. It is an active step toward ensuring that your golden years shine with serenity and do not sink under the weight of negativity. 2. A Buddhist perspective on setting boundaries. There is a common misperception that Buddhism teaches nothing but tolerance, kindness, and continuous giving, without any mention of personal boundaries. People sometimes believe that to practice compassion is to say yes to every plea for help. However, Buddhist thought is more nuanced. True compassion, or karuna, involves a genuine desire to alleviate suffering. The key word here is genuine. Compassion does not flourish in conditions where one is exploited or repeatedly harmed by others' neglect or entitlement. A wise analogy from ancient teachings compares the mind to a vessel of water. If you allow others to continually pour toxins into it, soon you will have nothing but a vessel of poison. How then can you possibly quench anyone's thirst or cultivate well-being for yourself? On the other hand, if you keep your water pure by taking mindful steps, setting boundaries, saying no to harmful influences, your vessel remains a source of clean water that can be shared. This concept of boundaries in Buddhism takes the form of right action, samyak karmanta, and right effort, samyak vayama, in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right effort suggests that we channel our energy wisely, avoiding unwholesome states and cultivating wholesome ones. If we find ourselves burdened with stress, resentment, or frustration because of certain relationships, it may be a sign that we are not applying right effort in our life. Another important perspective is that we must not confuse letting go of negative people with harboring ill will or hatred. We can, and should, release relationships that harm us with an attitude of loving kindness. This might sound paradoxical at first, but consider the possibility, you can wish someone well without permitting them to wreak havoc in your life. It is an act of self-compassion and compassion toward them, because it removes the conditions that allow toxic cycles to continue. If a manipulator or critic no longer has a willing target, it can prompt them to confront their own behaviors. This kind of protective stance, removing ourselves from harm, can spark growth in everyone involved. Ultimately, setting boundaries is a skillful means, upaya, that reflects a profound grasp of compassion. When you gently but firmly decline a request, or when you limit contact with someone who constantly drains you. You are not just protecting your energy, you are also giving that person the chance to step back, reflect, and possibly learn. We become each other's mirrors. After all, old age, more than any other phase, demands we master this skill if we wish to cultivate a peaceful environment that nourishes our body, mind, and spirit. 3. Person type number 1, the manipulator. 3.1. Recognizing subtle manipulations. The first archetype is the manipulator, an individual who, through guilt trips, persistent requests, or emotional blackmail, saps your energy and well-being. In my observation, manipulators often have a strong sense of who is likely to help them. They detect kindness and generosity in a person and then latch onto these qualities. Perhaps initially in small ways. You might hear, "Could you do me a quick favor?" Or "I hate to bother you." But over time, these small requests accumulate. And before long, you find yourself knee-deep in their errands, finances, or emotional crises. One real-life story that exemplifies these subtle manipulations is of a retired school teacher named Maria. Maria lived in a quiet suburb and had a nephew who frequently called her for help. He would say, "Auntie, I know you have a kind heart. My car broke down again. Could you please lend me $500? I promise I'll pay you back next month." Of course, Maria, a loving aunt, gave him the money. But next month, the nephew vanished, ignoring her calls. Eventually, he re-emerged with yet another crisis, always appealing to Maria's nurturing side. She felt obligated because family ties are strong in many cultures. But this cycle of giving and disappointment destroyed her peace. Though Maria's case is fairly direct, manipulations can also arise in intangible forms, persistent emotional venting, pressuring you to fix everything, or using emotional stories to keep you in a loop of worry. As you age, your emotional energy becomes more precious. Spending it constantly on manipulative people can exhaust your reserves and leave you drained for relationships that are actually healthy and reciprocal. 3.2. Why manipulators target compassionate hearts. Why do manipulators seek out certain targets? In Buddhism, we often discuss the interplay of karmic tendencies and psychological predispositions. A manipulative individual may sense that someone with a compassionate or empathetic nature is more likely to feel compelled to help. They exploit the universal desire to alleviate suffering, a noble instinct that, when twisted, can become a weakness. In families, this dynamic is amplified by cultural norms that say family must help family, no matter the situation. Certainly, there is a beautiful side to familial love. But if that love is manipulated into a consistent demand for resources, time, or emotional labor, we have moved away from genuine compassion into a realm of exploitation. 3.3. Finding peace through clear boundaries. In the face of manipulation, the remedy is boundary setting. This is not about shutting people out heartlessly. Rather, it is about preserving your own mental space. The manipulator's requests can escalate if you keep accommodating them. So, the next time they call with an urgent favor, pause, reflect, ask yourself, am I doing this out of genuine compassion? Or am I caving into guilt or fear? If the latter, consider saying no, calmly but firmly. Remind them you care but cannot solve all their issues. Yes, they may push back or accuse you of selfishness. Yet, ironically, That very accusation confirms the nature of their manipulation. Remember? The Buddha taught us that we cannot truly help others if we lose our own balance and well-being. 3.4. Personal reflections and real-life stories. I recall a personal experience with a distant relative who always seemed to have an emergency. It began with small loans to handle urgent household repairs. Then came repeated phone calls at odd hours. Each conversation ended in a plea, "You're the only one I can count on." My empathy led me to ignore red flags. But eventually, I found myself depleted, financially, emotionally, spiritually. Turning to Buddhist practice, I realized that my enabling behavior was as much a problem as his manipulation. I was not practicing skillful compassion, I was letting guilt control me. Learning to say, "I understand your problems, but I cannot fix them for you," was a giant leap forward. By gently refusing to participate in a toxic cycle, I preserved my energy for more constructive ways of helping, suggesting job training programs, connecting him with social services, and so on. This shift in approach was not only liberating for me, but also forced my relative to begin tackling his issues more responsibly. 3.5. Practical Buddhist-based strategies. 1. Mindful pause, before agreeing to a favor. Take 3 deep, mindful breaths. Observe any tension in your body or anxiety in your mind. This pause clarifies whether your motivation is genuine compassion or a sense of obligation or guilt. 2. Loving but firm language, using a calm tone. You might say, "I'm sorry to hear about your problem. I hope you find a good solution. However, I'm not in the position to help right now." Add a warm note of empathy but maintain the boundary. 3. Metta, loving kindness, meditation. If you feel residual guilt or tension after setting a boundary, practice sending loving kindness to yourself and to the person. Recite, "May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. May you also be safe, peaceful, and live with ease." This helps you let go of negative emotions and remain rooted in compassion. 4. Write down goals. List what is truly important to you in your golden years: peace, hobbies, time with supportive loved ones. Each time a manipulator demands your energy, check if it aligns with these goals. If not, reconsider your involvement. By employing these strategies, you can uphold the genuine spirit of Buddhist compassion while protecting yourself from harmful entanglements. 4. Person type number 2, the self-absorbed individual. 4.1. Understanding self-absorption in modern contexts. Next on our journey is the self-absorbed individual. In a world that often glorifies personal achievements, think of social media platforms where people constantly broadcast their highlights. Self-absorption can grow rampant. When you're in your later years, you might relish opportunities to share your life stories and accumulated wisdom. Yet, if you find yourself in conversation with someone who only talks about themselves and never reciprocates genuine interest, frustration inevitably follows. Aging can be accompanied by feelings of loneliness if you sense your voice no longer matters. A self-absorbed family member or friend can exacerbate that feeling, interrupting your reflections or ignoring them altogether. Conversations become one-sided recitals of their triumphs and woes, with minimal awareness of your presence. 4.2. Story, the self-absorbed child who became a burden. An elderly gentleman named Mr. Wong once confided in me about his adult daughter. She lived in another city and rarely visited. Yet whenever she did call, she spoke non-stop about her career challenges, love life, and social circle. Mr. Wong would attempt to share an anecdote, like how he had recently rediscovered gardening, or a funny story from his youth, but she brushed it aside. After half an hour of monologue, she'd abruptly end the call. What pained Mr. Wong was not just her disinterest, but the realization that he was invisible in her eyes. Despite raising her, sacrificing his time and resources, in her mind he existed solely to be an audience for her stories. This dynamic can feel devastating for a parent, especially in old age, when a simple "How are you doing, Dad?" can go a long way to convey love and respect. 4.3. Mindful communication and asserting your voice. A crucial Buddhist principle here is right speech, samyak vak, which encourages speech that is truthful, kind, and conducive to harmony. When dealing with a self-absorbed individual, we might be tempted to let them talk indefinitely, believing that confrontation is unkind. But we need to remember that healthy communication is a two-way street. It's beneficial, and even compassionate, to politely interject and share what's on our mind. Doing so can gently guide them toward reciprocity. For instance, in a phone conversation dominated by the self-absorbed person, you can pause and say, "I hear what you're saying, and appreciate you sharing. Would it be alright if I told you about something that's been on my mind?" This approach keeps the door open for balanced interaction, while subtly pointing out that you, too, need space to speak. 4.4. The power of empathy, balancing compassion and self-care. In Buddhism, empathy is a vital component of compassion. But empathy does not mean letting others consume all your emotional bandwidth. Indeed, if you find yourself resentful or exhausted after an encounter, it's a sign that the balance is off. Self-care includes creating an environment, physical or emotional, that supports your well-being. That might entail limiting the length or frequency of interactions with self-absorbed individuals. Sometimes, a scheduled approach works well. We can chat for 15 minutes tomorrow at 2 p.m. Sets an expectation so you don't become trapped in a marathon of one-sided chatter. 4.5. How to preserve your dignity and joy. To preserve dignity, we must remind ourselves that our stories, experiences, and emotions matter. We do not exist merely to validate someone else. If an interaction continually leaves you feeling like a passive observer, reevaluate whether this connection genuinely serves your life's purpose. From a Buddhist standpoint, each being has inherent worth. If another person cannot see your worth, it does not diminish you, but it signals that you may need to adjust how much time and effort you invest in that person. Look for relationships where you feel heard, seen, and valued. These are the relationships that truly nurture the soul. In old age, more than ever, you deserve that sense of shared respect. 5. Person type number 3, the chronic critic. 5.1. How criticism erodes self-worth. We move on to the third personality, the chronic critic. Although constructive feedback can help us grow, relentless, negative criticism has the opposite effect. One snide remark here or there might seem harmless, but over time, persistent criticism can chip away at our self-esteem. This is particularly painful in old age, when we may already be grappling with changes in our health, social circle, or daily routines. Individuals who critique incessantly often claim they mean well, "I'm just being honest." But in reality, the hallmark of a chronic critic is the intent or the effect of belittling you. You might hear them comment on your choices: "You really shouldn't keep that old furniture," "Your habits," "You're doing your yoga wrong," That's why you have back pain. Or even your personal beliefs, why are you wasting your time with that hobby? Over time, these comments create a toxic cloud around your sense of self. 5.2. Distinguishing constructive feedback from destructive negativity. Buddhism encourages self-inquiry. Before labeling someone as a critic, evaluate whether they are offering genuinely constructive feedback. Sometimes, a person who deeply cares might notice an error or unhealthy behavior and point it out tactfully. This constructive feedback often comes with a tone of kindness, clarity, and a willingness to help. The chronic critic, however, tends to deliver harsh judgments that target your identity, not just your actions. Moreover, they rarely provide helpful solutions, just negativity. This negativity arises from their own dissatisfaction or insecurity, projected onto others. From a karmic perspective, critics are often weighed down by internal burdens they have not resolved, so they externalize them onto the people closest to them. 5.3. A Tale of Two Elderly Friends. Let me share a story of two dear friends in their 70s. Robert and Gerald. Robert had adopted a plant-based diet for health reasons, while Gerald constantly mocked him, "You're missing out on real food. Vegetarians are so weak. Or you're going to get sick on that rabbit food." He belittled Robert every time they had a meal together. At first, Robert tried to defend his choices, explaining the health benefits he experienced. Yet Gerald persisted in mocking him. Eventually, Robert realized these jabs were not about diet. They were about Gerald feeling uneasy that Robert was making positive changes while he was not. Gerald's critiques stemmed from an unaddressed sense of insecurity. Once Robert recognized this, he chose to limit their mealtimes together, politely telling Gerald, "I respect your perspective, but I'm happy with my choices, so I hope you can respect them as well." This boundary prevented further damage to Robert's self-esteem. 5.4. Mindfulness practices to diffuse hurtful comments. When facing a chronic critic, a mindful approach can work wonders. Try these steps. 1. Pause and observe. Notice how your body reacts. Do you feel tension in the shoulders? A knot in your stomach? Or a rush of anger? By observing rather than immediately reacting, you remain anchored in the present moment. 2. Respond. Don't react. Instead of lashing out or fleeing, calmly respond with statements like, "Thank you for your concern, but I'm comfortable with my decision." This stance shows self-respect without escalating conflict. 3. Reflect on the source. Sometimes it helps to remind yourself that chronic critics often act out of their own unresolved issues. Understanding this can transform your anger into compassion, while still keeping a boundary if necessary. 4. Seek supportive allies when dealing with negativity. It's healthy to balance your interactions by spending time with friends or family members who uplift you. Their positivity can reinforce your sense of self-worth. 5.5. Embracing confidence in your chosen path. One fundamental Buddhist teaching is that all phenomena are impermanent. Criticism arises and passes away, just like any other condition. By anchoring yourself in self-knowledge, you can remain unshaken by external negativity. You have spent a lifetime discovering who you are. Now, in your golden years, trust that you know what brings you joy and serenity. Confidence in your own wisdom is a powerful buffer against the barbs of a chronic critic. 6. Person type number 4, the irresponsible dependent. 6.1. Why old age shouldn't be spent in constant rescue missions. The fourth archetype is the irresponsible dependent, someone who chronically fails to take accountability for their choices and expects others to save them from the consequences. They might be family members who repeatedly fall into financial trouble, or friends who always find themselves in crises. You might have an adult child who frequently says, "I lost my job again, can I move back in with you?" Or "I need you to co-sign another loan because you're my parent." While it's natural to help loved ones in times of genuine need, the trouble arises when these situations become cyclical, the person never learns from their mistakes, and you become the perpetual safety net. In your later years, the stress of managing someone else's chaotic life can erode your physical and emotional well-being. 6.2. Karma and personal responsibility. From a Buddhist viewpoint, each individual is responsible for their own karma. We create our future circumstances through present actions. By continually rescuing an irresponsible individual, we inadvertently interfere with their karmic lessons. They do not get the chance to face the consequences of their actions, be it overspending, poor job performance, or a lack of planning. Allowing someone to experience the results of their choices can be an act of tough love. This concept parallels a well-known Buddhist analogy: if you help a butterfly break free from its cocoon prematurely, you rob it of the struggle that strengthens its wings. Without that struggle, the butterfly may never learn to fly. 6.3. The balance between helping and enabling. The line between genuine help and enabling can be murky. Consider these guidelines to distinguish the two. 1. Repetition. If you find yourself repeatedly bailing out the same person for the same problem, you've likely shifted from helping to enabling. 2. Accountability. If the individual shows no initiative to change or seek professional help, or continues to blame external factors for their situation, it's a sign that your help might actually be hindering their growth. 3. Your energy levels. If you feel drained, resentful, or anxious each time you assist them, that's a red flag. True compassion, though it may involve effort, generally leaves you with a sense of loving intention rather than exhaustion. 6.4. Real-life anecdotes. When financial support turns toxic. A poignant example comes from a widowed woman named Mrs. Kim, who lived on a modest pension. Her son approached her for money multiple times to start various business ventures. Each venture failed because he never followed through on research or planning. Despite losing thousands of dollars she really couldn't afford to lose. Mrs. Kim hesitated to say no. She believed it was her duty to support her child's dreams. Over time, her financial stability deteriorated, forcing her to sell her small home and move into a tiny apartment. When she finally told her son, "I'm sorry, but I cannot invest in any more of your projects," she felt immense guilt. Yet, it was that moment of boundary setting that spurred her son to realize he had to learn real business skills and take responsibility for his own life. They navigated a difficult period of strained relations, but eventually, it became a catalyst for his maturation. 6.5. Techniques for compassionate detachment. In Buddhism, compassionate detachment is the practice of caring for someone without becoming entangled in their suffering. Here are a few steps. 1. Offer guidance. Not constant rescue. Instead of handing out money, share resources. Here's a financial counselor, or here's a job training program. This empowers the person to help themselves. 2. Set clear limits. Politely but firmly state what you can and cannot do. I can give you some advice, but I can't solve this for you. 3. Emotional self-care. Engage in daily meditation or mindfulness walks to clear your mental clutter. This helps you maintain clarity when faced with yet another request. 4. Seek support, talk to friends, spiritual teachers, or counselors about your situation. Outside perspectives can help you differentiate between genuine compassion and destructive enabling. 5. Reflect on interdependence. Buddhism teaches that we are interconnected. True support involves helping someone become self-reliant, ultimately benefiting the entire family or community. 7. Person type number 5, the ungrateful taker. 7.1. How ingratitude poisons the joy of giving. Finally, we arrive at the ungrateful taker, someone who readily accepts your kindness but rarely acknowledges or appreciates it. This kind of ingratitude can feel like a personal slight, especially if you've gone out of your way to assist them. Over time, ungratefulness can dampen your desire to do good. You may wonder, what's the point of being generous if it's never appreciated? However, a crucial Buddhist lesson is that true generosity doesn't hinge on external acknowledgement. The intrinsic value of a compassionate act lies in the intention behind it. Still, if an individual continually takes advantage of your generosity without any sign of gratitude, it creates an imbalance. 7.2. Spotting patterns of entitlement. Ungrateful takers often exhibit entitlement. They assume your generosity is owed to them. They may say, "You have so much free time. Why wouldn't you help me move apartments?" Or, "You're retired, you should be able to babysit my kids anytime." They rarely consider your own needs or limitations. In old age, this sense of being taken for granted can breed resentment and sadness. 7.3. A fable of gratitude from ancient Buddhist lore. There is an ancient Buddhist story about a lay follower who regularly brought offerings to a local monastery but never received a simple thank you from the abbot. Confused and hurt, he finally asked the abbot why his generosity was met with silence. The abbot replied that while gratitude is a virtue he personally cultivated, the lay follower had to practice giving without attachment, that is, giving out of genuine compassion, without expecting praise. Yet, at the same time, the abbot acknowledged that a lack of gratitude from recipients could indicate a spiritual immaturity that the abbot sought to correct within his monastic community. The moral is twofold: the giver learns non-attachment, and the ungrateful recipients are reminded that gratitude is a necessary step in spiritual growth. 7.4. Redirecting your kindness. When dealing with persistent ingratitude, it might be wise to redirect your kindness to those who genuinely benefit. Volunteer organizations, community centers, or charitable groups typically appreciate all the help they receive. This redirection can reignite the joy of giving and offer you a sense of purpose in your later years. 7.5. Creating a circle of mutual respect. Ideally, your circle of friends and family should be one of mutual respect and appreciation. If you notice that a particular individual consistently ignores your efforts or dismisses your help, reflect on how much you want to invest in that relationship. You can try communicating openly, "I'm glad to help, but I've been feeling like my efforts go unnoticed." Sometimes, making them aware of their behavior can spark positive change. However, if nothing improves, limiting your involvement is an act of self-respect, not cruelty. Remember, you have every right to preserve your emotional well-being, especially in a stage of life that should be defined by peace and contentment. 8. Weaving it all together, the necessity of self-respect. At this point, let's step back and examine these 5 problematic archetypes: the manipulator, the self-absorbed, the chronic critic, the irresponsible dependent, and the ungrateful taker. They share a common theme, an inability, or unwillingness, to reciprocate respect, empathy, or genuine concern. Engaging extensively with such individuals can corrode our sense of self-worth, drain our energy, and taint what should be a period of relative repose. Self-respect serves as a protective shield. Far from being a sign of selfishness, it reflects an understanding that in order to truly practice kindness, we must first ensure we are not diminishing our own light in the process. This principle is echoed in many Buddhist texts, where the cultivation of moral discipline, sila, and mindfulness, smrti, fosters a clear recognition of one's value. Think of your lifetime as a grand narrative. You've gathered experiences, wisdom, triumphs, and lessons learned through hardships. All of these have shaped who you are. Honor this journey by not allowing your final chapters to be overshadowed by individuals who do not respect the dignity you have rightfully earned. 9. Real-life extended examples, stories from the community. In this section, I want to share a few more elaborate stories that underscore how these 5 archetypes manifest in real-life scenarios. Each story offers a unique perspective, illustrating both the challenges and the Buddhist-inspired strategies people have used to navigate them. 9.1. Ms. Harper's Dilemma. Ms. Harper is a 65-year-old widow living in a small Midwestern town in the United States. She has 2 grown children who reside in a nearby city, deeply devoted to Buddhism. Ms. Harper attends her local meditation center regularly for communal chanting sessions and volunteer work. One day, her daughter Lauren returned home after going through a tough divorce. Struggling with emotional trauma, Lauren became highly critical and self-centered. She frequently scolded Ms. Harper for not understanding modern life, and insisted her mother cover her living expenses while she job hunted. Whenever Ms. Harper gently suggested local career fairs or skill development courses, Lauren dismissed the advice as out of date. At the same time, Ms. Harper's son, Ethan, began calling weekly to request money for his latest cryptocurrency investments. He accused her of unfairness when she didn't comply. "You're helping Lauren. Why won't you help me?" Feeling caught between her responsibilities as a mother and her own desire for a peaceful retirement, Ms. Harper grew increasingly distressed. In a tearful discussion with her local meditation teacher, Ms. Harper admitted she felt manipulated by both children. The teacher advised her to practice metta, loving kindness, meditation every day, directing compassion toward herself as well as Lauren and Ethan, while also establishing healthier boundaries. Following this guidance, Ms. Harper mustered the courage to talk to her daughter. "I love you very much, but I can't keep supporting you financially if you're not willing to help yourself." She gave Lauren a reasonable deadline to find a job or relocate. With Ethan, she calmly asserted, "I wish you success, but I'm not comfortable putting my money into something I don't understand." Initially, both children reacted with anger. However, in time, Lauren realized she needed to stand on her own 2 feet. She secured a part-time position at a local store and started therapy to work through her emotional struggles. Ethan, understanding his mother's fixed income, looked elsewhere for funding and eventually learned to manage his finances more responsibly. Feeling a weight lifted, Ms. Harper continued volunteering at her meditation center with renewed calm and contentment. 9.2. The American Grandfather Who Found Buddha's Teachings. In a small town in the Midwest, a 72-year-old grandfather, let's call him Harold, stumbled upon Buddhist teachings in a local library. Fascinated by the principle of non-attachment, he started reading more about the Buddha's life and the concept of mindfulness. Harold had a manipulative son-in-law, who frequently borrowed his truck and never returned it on time. The son-in-law also subtly guilted Harold into financing parts of his new business. Whenever Harold hesitated, the son-in-law would say, "If you really cared about our family, you'd help me out." Harold, wanting to be a supportive father figure, gave in time and again, only to feel resentment brewing in his chest. Inspired by Buddhism, Harold started practicing short breathing meditations every morning. After a few months, he felt calmer and realized that his son-in-law's demands were a form of manipulation. He decided to compassionately set boundaries. Instead of outright refusal, he used a technique of negotiated giving. "I can help you with one small loan, but we will write it down as a formal agreement, with a repayment date. After that, you're on your own." For the truck, he started asking for a small rental fee to cover gas and maintenance. The son-in-law complained, but Harold calmly reiterated, "This is what I can offer. I wish you well, but my resources are limited." Over time, the son-in-law scaled back his requests. Harold's new approach also encouraged him to reflect on his sense of entitlement. Meanwhile, Harold discovered a sense of empowerment, knowing he could be loving yet firm, giving yet not exploited. 9.3. A Retiree's Journey to Emotional Independence. Ms. Rodriguez, a recently retired bank clerk, lived with her sister who was chronically critical. Her sister pointed out every perceived flaw: how Ms. Rodriguez dressed, cooked, spent her time, and even how she prayed. Initially, Ms. Rodriguez tried to fix herself to appease her sister, but the criticisms never ended. She found herself feeling worthless and depressed. "Am I really that incompetent?" she wondered. Ms. Rodriguez joined a local Buddhist meditation group, where she learned to label and observe her thoughts without judgment. She realized that her sister's criticisms were more reflective of the sister's own insecurities than anything else. Gaining confidence, Ms. Rodriguez calmly told her sister, "I respect your opinions, but I am going to live by my values." She then started seeking social interactions elsewhere, volunteering at a community center, taking up painting classes, and even forming new friendships. The less she internalized her sister's remarks, the more her self-esteem blossomed. Eventually, her sister began criticizing less, likely because her constant barbs no longer had the effect they once did. Ms. Rodriguez's composure and self-assuredness created a peaceful atmosphere that even the sister found less inviting to attack. 10. Lessons learned: cultivating a peaceful heart in old age. By examining the experiences of individuals like Mrs. Lan, Harold, and Ms. Rodriguez, we see a recurring pattern when confronted with toxic behaviors. Mindful boundary setting coupled with compassion can lead to transformative outcomes. Here are some overarching lessons that emerge. 1. Compassion begins at home. Charity starts with yourself. If you deplete your emotional reserves, you cannot effectively offer genuine care to others. 2. Embrace non-attachment. Let go of the need for constant approval or the fear of conflict. A gentle no can be more compassionate in the long run than a resentful yes. 3. Act. Don't react. Immediate emotional reactions often lead to escalating problems. A mindful pause allows you to respond with clarity and kindness. 4. Recognize patterns. If the same person repeatedly drains or manipulates you, it's time to investigate deeper relational dynamics. Don't label everyone's pleas as manipulative, but do watch for consistent harmful patterns. 5. Seek support. turning to a spiritual community. A counselor or supportive friends can provide perspective. Sometimes, just voicing your struggles clarifies the path forward. 6. Genuine forgiveness frees you. True forgiveness in Buddhism is about releasing negative emotions from your own heart. It doesn't always mean reconciling or continuing the relationship in the same form. But it does free you from resentment. 7. Old age is precious. View these years as a time of spiritual blossoming. Safeguard them with intention. If certain people disrupt your peace, it is neither cruel nor un-Buddhist to create distance. 11. Conclusion and call to action. As we near the end of our deep dive, let's gather the threads of insight we've woven together. Old age can be, and deserves to be, a period of equanimity, reflection, and gentle joy. Yet, we must guard this peace as diligently as a gardener protects delicate blossoms from weeds. The weeds in this analogy are those 5 types of individuals who might choke the roots of our tranquility. Manipulators who exploit your compassion. Self-absorbed individuals who leave no room for your voice. Chronic critics who undermine your self-esteem. Irresponsible dependents who use you as a safety net without learning accountability. Ungrateful takers who erode the pure joy of giving. By recognizing these patterns, setting mindful boundaries, and practicing genuine compassion, we honor both ourselves and those around us. Sometimes, the most compassionate act is to refuse to participate in unhealthy dynamics. That refusal can spark a necessary awakening for everyone involved. Before we conclude, I invite you to reflect on your own relationships. Are there any ties that drain your energy or overshadow your joy? If so, remember, you are not powerless. You can approach the situation with wisdom, empathy, and the courage to change. Thank you for joining me here at Zen Echoes of Wisdom on this extensive exploration. If you found these insights valuable or know someone who might benefit from them, I kindly encourage you to subscribe to our channel to stay connected with more content on mindfulness, Buddhist philosophy, and holistic well-being. Click the notification bell so you'll be gently informed whenever we publish a new video, ensuring you never miss a moment of inspiration. Your presence and willingness to learn contribute to a community that cherishes understanding, compassion, and inner peace. I truly appreciate each one of you for being part of this journey.